In 1933, an Italian pilot was flying over the Libyan desert when something impossible appeared beneath his wings. Perfect lines cutting through the sand, walls emerging from the dunes, the unmistakable layout of an entire city where there should only be emptiness. He had just rediscovered something the world had forgotten for over 1,000 years. An empire that built rivers in the desert, dominated the Sahara when it was even more hostile, and simply vanished without leaving traces in humanity's memory. But the most disturbing thing isn't that this civilization was forgotten. It's what they discovered when they finally started digging into those sands, because what emerged contradicted everything we thought we knew about ancient desert peoples. The Garamantes weren't just another tribe lost to time. They were an advanced civilization that thrived in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth for over 1,000 years, from 500 BCE to 700 CE. While Rome was building its empire in the north, the Garamantes were engineering an underground network so sophisticated that modern engineers still struggle to understand how they accomplished it. They created an invisible empire, one that existed beneath the surface, hidden from the eyes of history. Their capital, Garama, housed tens of thousands of people in the heart of the Sahara, sustained by a technology that seemed impossible for their time. But here's what makes their story truly unsettling. They didn't fall to war, plague, or natural disaster in the conventional sense. They were consumed by their own success, buried by the very ambition that made them great. And the way they vanished holds a warning that resonates eerily with our own time. The secret of the Garamantes lay beneath their feet. While other civilizations built upward, reaching for the sky with monuments and towers, the Garamantes dug down into the earth, creating what they called Foggaras, underground aqueducts that stretched for hundreds of miles beneath the desert. These weren't simple tunnels. They were masterpieces of ancient engineering, dug by hand through solid rock, sloping at precise angles to allow water to flow by gravity alone, from distant aquifers to their cities and farms. Thousands of these tunnels crisscrossed beneath the Sahara, invisible from above, carrying life through the land of death. The scale was staggering. Archaeologists have mapped over 600 miles of these underground channels, and they believe that's only a fraction of what once existed. Each tunnel required perfect calculations. Too steep and the water would erode the channel, too shallow and it would stagnate. The Garamantes achieved this without modern tools, without computers, without even written mathematical formulas. As far as we know, they transformed an ocean of sand into fertile gardens, grew grain where nothing should grow, and built a trading empire that stretched from the Mediterranean to sub-Saharan Africa. Their merchants were legends, crossing the Sahara with caravans of goods, slaves, and precious stones, controlling trade routes that made them fabulously wealthy. Roman writers spoke of them with a mixture of awe and fear, describing chariots that flew across the dunes and warriors who knew the desert like no one else. But the Garamantes had made a fatal bargain with the earth itself. Those aquifers they tapped weren't being replenished. The water they drew had been trapped underground for thousands of years, ancient reserves from a time when the Sahara was green. With every gallon they lifted, with every field they irrigated, with every person they added to their cities, they were draining a resource that would never return. For centuries, it didn't matter. The water seemed endless, and their civilization grew more complex, more dependent on the constant flow from below. They expanded their tunnel networks, dug deeper, reached farther, always finding more water to fuel their growth. But the water table was dropping, inch by inch, year by year, in a process so gradual that no single generation noticed the danger. By the 5th century CE, something began to change. The Foggaras that once flowed steadily started to weaken. Wells that had never run dry began to fail. The Garamantes dug deeper, extended their tunnels further into the earth, but they were chasing a vanishing resource. The archaeological evidence tells a story of increasing desperation. Tunnels dug at steeper angles, wells descending to unprecedented depths, settlements gradually abandoned from the periphery inward. And then comes the most haunting discovery of all. When modern researchers finally excavated Garama and its surrounding sites, they found something that sent chills through the archaeological community. The cities weren't destroyed. There were no signs of invasion, no layers of ash from fires, no mass graves from plague or warfare. The buildings simply stood empty, preserved by the dry desert air, as if the inhabitants had just walked away. Tables were left set, tools remained in workshops, possessions stayed in homes. It was as if tens of thousands of people had simply realized, perhaps over the course of a generation or two, that their home could no longer sustain them. Dispersed into the desert, their civilization dissolving like water into sand. The Foggaras, those magnificent tunnels that had sustained an empire for a millennium, became tombs of ambition, empty channels leading nowhere, monuments to a civilization that had engineered its own demise. Today, the ruins of Garama lie beneath the Libyan desert, largely unexplored due to the region's instability. The Foggaras are still there, collapsed in places, but many still intact. A silent underground network that once pulsed with life. UNESCO has recognized the site as a World Heritage location, but it remains one of the least visited and least studied major archaeological sites in the world, protected more by political chaos than by any conservation effort. The Garamantes left no written records, no inscriptions explaining their philosophy or their understanding of what was happening to them. We can only read their story in the physical evidence, the tunnels that go nowhere, the abandoned cities, the water that finally ran out. But perhaps their silence speaks louder than words ever could. They stand as a civilization that mastered their environment so completely that they forgot they were part of it, that consumed the resources that sustained them, because those resources seemed limitless until the day they weren't. The desert that once yielded to their ingenuity eventually reclaimed everything, burying their achievements under the same sands they once conquered. And as we face our own questions about sustainability, resource depletion, and the long-term consequences of our choices, the Garamantes whisper from beneath the dunes, a question that grows more urgent with each passing year. How do we know we're not digging our own Foggaras right now, draining reserves we think are endless, building a civilization on resources that will one day simply run dry? The desert keeps their answer buried, but perhaps we already know what it is.